Alright. Right. Hello everyone. Give me 2 seconds. Still so give me 1 second while I furiously set up. See how much of it I can get done before transitioning over. It just looks a bit unprofesh. Oh, I don't know there. This was not a fun exercise. No, we're gonna up anyway. 7. Yeah, that should be most things. Yeah, could be worse. Right, let's get this code running. And then let's get Globe. Let's all just pretend that that was all working before we started. Let's add something in the chat. There we go. Hello, hello. Pattern 6. So well that boots up. I had an absolute horror show on the last one. I think we kind of worked through exercise 6 and I managed to write about 2 lines of it by myself. The majority of it I ended up just copying from the answer. I had a question that I was going to ask Kent on the what does he call it? Office hours, but unfortunately I was out at the weekend, so I didn't get a chance. So I'm just going to be winging this. I still have the question, and I'm still perplexed as to why it is the way it was. Whatever. So I think I'm going to move on. Was the weird way of saying that, and then I'll ask that question. And then if I get the answer to it, then I can come back to it later. But otherwise, I feel like I'm just going to be staring at the screen for another hour. Absolutely baffled as to what's going on. So I think I'm going to skip over this. So I'd mocked the geolocation. That part was fine. I don't really understand the act function. That's going to have a little bit more work. And mocking the module as well. I'd kind of started on. Where's my VS Code? How far did I get on the mocking? Not a great deal. So we were trying to mock the entire module. And then we were saying if this function was ever called, then use our mock function and return from this. But it was not in a good place. So I think I'm going to leave that where it was. And I think I'm going to move on to exercise 7. These are extra credits, to be fair. It always sucks skipping over them, but I want to keep moving with this. So I just need to reply to this, and then I'll be right with you. All right, let's cancel this. Let's clear this. To do. Leave a note for myself there. Look down up. First, since we'll need to do a bit of reading, let's run the test script. So let's run a pattern. 07, exercise 7. Right, so there's an intro video here that's about 3 minutes long. I'm going to sit and watch that and then get cracking on the exercise. But in order to do that, I need to throw this blocker up and yeah, make sure the audio's not coming through there. For anyone who's not joined before, we're more than happy to sit and walk through the code and the exercise. But if you want to watch the video content that comes with the course, then you need to purchase it from EpicReact.Dev. Okay, I've got the video. I'm just going to be off mic for 3 minutes or so. All right. That music's just a bit loud. Okay, let's get cracking. Testing context and a custom render method. A common question when testing React components is what to do with React components that use contextual values. If you take a step back and consider the testing philosophy of writing tests that resemble the way our software is used, then you'll know you want to render your component with the provider. That makes sense. The one problem with this is if you want to re-render this, for example, to give it new props, then you have to include the context providers. This is kind of annoying, so instead you can provide a wrapper option, and that will ensure that the re-renders are wrapped as well. So we define a wrapper, and then we can pass it as an object to our render method. Then we call re-render on the component to test. Cool. Let's take a look at this quickly. As a React component is the wrapper to have it rendered around the inner element. This is most useful for creating new reusable custom render functions for common data providers. Setup, for example. Create your own custom render method that does this automatically. Custom render method. Here we will return the right to left render. Here, pass the UI, pass the wrapper, and any other options. So we call render. So if we want to put any additional options in there, then we just not there because that would break everything. We could add an options object into here, and then that would work. But spread into this object. Okay, that makes sense. There you can put that custom render function in your own module and use your custom render method instead of the built-in one from React Testing Library. Cool. In this exercise we have an easy button, so let's grab this. I'm guessing it's this. And as usual, just gonna dull that a little bit. Oh, I actually found a monitor setting that doesn't give me a headache, which is pretty nice. Go. All right, we have an easy button that's styled differently based on the theme. So we have an easy button, and then we toggle the theme, and it changes from white to black. Cool. Your job is to assert on the styles it has, but you first need to render the UI with the theme provider. Set the initial theme value. We're going to set the initial theme value. It's going to be the light theme and assert that it uses the light styles. We're then going to click the toggle theme button, which will trigger a re-render. Do we need to click the button? We're going to trigger a re-render, and then we're going to assert whether the color has changed. Yeah, cool. First one is just the initial value, I think. All right, uncomment all of this code and your test will be busted. Excellent. So let's save that. Also, this is going to fail, and it fails. Console error. Use theme should be used within a theme provider, which makes sense, right? Because we're rendering this button, and this button uses the theme context. Can I actually just open up the easy button? Yeah. Like this. Yes, we're using use theme, and use theme needs to be used within that context. So let's get the markdown, and then let's do it step by step. So this is the annoying part. Let's just grab this. Oh, excuse me. I knew that was coming about 10 seconds earlier than I actually sneezed. Right, so we have this custom wrapper. So let's just keep this actually. Let's have a function called wrapper, and in here we're gonna return the theme provider. Keyboard would work. There we go. So we're going to pass children, and then that's going to wrap it in there. So we're going to update the render call to use the wrapper option using the theme provider. So we're going to call, here's the wrapper. I wonder what the difference between container and wrapper is. Sure, we'll find out. So we, for the exercise, we're using this. Our wrapper is this function, and our component is the easy button. Let's just grab this. We actually don't need the re-render just now. Don't need this. Screen. So the button, you're going to get the easy button. Ooh. Update the render call above to use the render option using the theme provider. So if I actually just do this just now and expect, what's my expect? Doing this in the evening after a full day of working is hilarious because my brain is fried by this point, so I really have to try and kickstart it. Get by roll button, that's cool. And we have our function, we're going to render the button, and we're going to use that wrapper. So now the test, let's get to the bottom of this. Let's run this. I don't think it should blow up. Well, it certainly shouldn't have the same error message as before, right? Okay. Unable to find the button, right? Because we are rendering it here, and we're looking for it here. Which don't make no sense. This can live outside of the test, I think. I'm going to render it first and then get the button. And then we're going to see if it has the correct styles. We are missing the initial theme value. Let's see what happens. Ah, nice passing. Excellent. Already further forward than last Thursday. So we have this. Where did I see something about the initial theme? Yeah, here we go. You'll need to render the UI with theme provider and set the initial theme value. So let's look at the easy button. Theme. So the initial theme actually defaults to light, so we shouldn't actually need to set that. However, we will for the re-render. So. Do I still need to wrap? I must do. So I need to wrap it in this wrapper. What's a clever way of doing this? The theme. Let me just check. So the theme provider. The theme provider takes the initial theme as a prop. Then it applies that as the default state for the theme. So let's just bring that down here. Let's put theme down here too. So where was that re-render? Yeah. We need to worry about context at all. Render component to test. Nope, that's not what I want at all. I want to deconstruct this. It's going to re-render for me. Then I'm going to call... Actually, just want to confirm that it's working. So I'm just going to save this. I just want to check that... well, this is being called. So I just want to make sure that the theme provider exists at the moment. It does. Cool. So it has initially rendered on the page. Then I want to re-render. Pardon me. I want to re-render this easy button, this wrapper, can I pass? See set up for examples. Custom render. So that's passing options to the custom render. I want to provide an option to this. Here we have all the providers. I think what I can do is wrapper. That's accepting. I wonder if this is a function. If I can do that. Yeah, let me just close that. What am I missing here? Cool. Just make sure that it doesn't break. My test should now fail. That's because I've set the initial theme to be dark. So this is going to be wrong, because this is going to wrap and the default value has been set to dark over. The initial theme's default value has been overwritten. So as well as accepting children as a prop, let's just keep it named the same. Then let's change this hard-coded string to a prop value. I don't think we need to declare a fallback here, because if nothing gets passed to this, it will default to the light. That's pretty. So I think if I do initial theme was dark, test should pass again. It does. And then I'm going to do an expect here, and I'm going to expect this to be the other way around. Jite. Yeah. Slay the spires tomorrow, man. Okay, that didn't work. Good times. This is actually moving on to the extra credit. So we've got the initial exercise, which is fine. And now we want to add a test for the dark theme. I really thought that would work. Let me just make sure I've spelled everything right. The initial theme. Of interest, I'm just going to do a little hack where I'm going to say, I'm going to log props here, just see if anything's actually being passed through. And if you do an OR here, console.log will always resolve to falsy. It'll be cast to falsy, sorry. Which means this fallback value will be triggered. It's a good way just to get a log and then return your component. Of course, there's a random E just. Is that up there? Like props logged. Is not defined. Yeah, this doesn't look like the correct implementation. Maybe I just need to, instead of it being a function, maybe if I just pass that, maybe it'll automatically. It does not. It's a test. See, that adds the new prop. Oh, hold up. Let's look at the bad. Yeah, use team doesn't accept any props. Let's take a look at re-render. So that part is fine. Let's go to the examples page, update props. I mean, alternatively, we could have, this doesn't feel like the right way to do things, right? But let's get it working first and then refactor it later. We could just have a light wrapper and then have a dark wrapper. And then the initial theme here is dark. Use our light wrapper initially. And then we're going to re-render dark wrapper. Pardon. Apply to the button. Expect button to have style. So the toggle theme isn't on here, so I don't think I want to use that. There'd be no sense testing that. I'm really surprised that didn't work. Theme provider. And get a log. Okay, so it's light in both instances. Which means that the re-render isn't working. Let's look at that custom render accepts options. Let's get rid of this. That isn't correct. Let's put that back to wrapper. Then I think we're going to need to create our custom render function. I'm going to call this custom render for now. It's going to accept a UI component and some options. And then we're going to return render with the UI. let's keep options here. So we have the UI, we have options, and we have, what do we call this? Wrapper options. Let's assume this function. It'd be weird if it wasn't. Let's spread wrapper options in here. We have a custom render. Chooses the render. It just takes a UI component. It's just going to wrap it in a wrapper with some additional options if we so choose. Let's default that to an empty object. Pretty sure ESLint complains. You should put those at the end. Let's do a custom render here. It's annoying. It's not going to work. Adding props there. Easy peasy. Let's just look at the re-render. Are there any like advanced cases of that? Actually, this actually just says add a test for the dark theme. So I suppose for that to pass, renders with the dark styles for the dark theme. The dark theme. And sorry, just going around the problem. We're going to need to get there eventually because that's the whole point of this re-render method, right? Feel right. It does say I have a separate test for the dark theme. What are the extra credits? Let's have a look. Create a custom render method. This duplicate. Yeah, it's duplication. Okay, let's do it. In order. Renders the dark theme. We don't need a custom render at this moment in time. We're gonna have a wrapper, and we're just gonna move in here. It's gonna be, I suppose it'll hoist, but let's just put it in order so it's easier to read. No longer need that. Okay, so both tests pass now. That's cool. I'm sure we're going to find out a better way to do this. Let's just get a wee bit more space here. This duplication is cramping my style. Create a custom render method that encapsulates this shared logic. It'll need to accept an option for the theme. Dark or light. So we just end up back at the problem we were at 2 minutes ago. Render options, wrapper. Pass a React component as the wrapper option to have it rendered around the inner element. This is most useful for creating reusable render functions for common data providers. See setup, for example. Yeah, custom render method that encapsulates the shared logic. Custom render method. I mean, this is going to be pretty verbose, but I'll go with it anyway, right? So let's create a custom render. That's going to accept. It definitely needs a theme pass to it. Let's grab this. Theme provider, that needs to be the initial theme to match the props. And then we're going to return the React testing library's render method with something. Okay, so we shouldn't need that. We're going to call custom render here. Let's take the object out of this. So we're going to pass UI first. Let's give it this. Then we're going to pass an options object, which is going to contain this wrapper. Wrapper, custom render here. Even just past that, we just, all we actually need is UI and theme. So we'll pass this, we'll pass light. Oh, we're not returning anything from render. We are going to render the UI. The options is going to contain a wrapper. Just going to use our wrapper function. Let's pass theme through here. Let's default the theme to light. And then let's put some options here as an empty object. We're going to spread our options into this. We're going to render the UI. We're going to wrap it in this wrapper. This is in scope. We actually don't need to pass this because it will default to light. Good times. And I think we can remove, where did I put that log? We've got it through as light and dark now. Cool. That's working. We're passing through the UI, and I actually prefer doing this. Instead of passing multiple props, I really like passing an object and passing properties. That way I shouldn't need still going to default this to an empty object because I'm going to spread it here. And I think it errors if you try to spread undefined. So here we're not going to pass the theme. So this is undefined, which is undefined, which is going to come through here as undefined, and the fall back to light. I'm hoping this still passes. If it does, then I should be happy with that. No! Okay, so the light styles. Oh, that's interesting. Are they not correct? Unable to find the easy button. Ah, it's because I changed it to an object. So that now needs to be UI. Panic over. Swap testing library with app test utils. We've actually already created a custom render method for this. So swap the import of testing library React with test/test utils. Cool. Test utils. What have we got here? That was pretty close. The wrapper. Yeah, that's pretty close. Except he wrapped the object here. So he passed a single options object. Ah, okay. Where is my exercise? Cool. So let me. What's the name of render? So from. God, my brain is mush. Where are we? 7 extra credit. Swap testing library React at test/test utils. So let's replace this. This will actually break because it's not exact. So we're going to go back to render. So we no longer need this. We're passing through the UI outside of the object. Then we're not passing any options here. And then here we're passing through the UI. And we're passing through a theme prop with dark. That was not what I wanted. Yep. I can remove this now. I think if I run this, I'm gonna render the button theme. Let's just grab that test utils. There we go. This theme is now being passed through on this options object. No additional options are being passed. And because we don't specify a theme here, then it's going to default to light here. So I actually don't even think you would need that, right? Yeah, cool. Maybe I'll submit a PR for that. All right, they're both passing. That's the good times. And that finishes that exercise. That is perfect timing. So let me just quickly fill this out. Oh, I love it when stuff works. That's a test with upper components. Yep. Yep. Awesome. All right, it is 5 to 9, so I'm just gonna take like a 5-6 minute break. I'm gonna go grab some water and stuff. Then I'm gonna come back and watch the solutions to the video. So I'll be back shortly. All right, where were we? Okay. So that was not working. I'm just going to spend, how long have we got here? Get the wrapper component. It's like 2 minutes. Dark theme, 50 seconds. Render method, 3 minutes. 3 minutes. So like 10 minutes. So I'm going to put my mic on mute. I need to put the blocker up. And I'm just going to sit and watch these videos. If you have any questions, now's normally a good time to ask, just because I'm going to be sitting watching the video. I'll be off mic, but I can sit and reply in the text chat. All right, let's test some custom hooks. We can close. Let's just clear that. Rerun the test. Run to 8 now. Let's clear all of this. Okay, testing custom hooks. I think we just want the counter. Yeah, that's all we need. And let's do a pattern. We're going to do 0.8. Okay, testing custom hooks is a common question. Step back and think about how the guiding principles apply to the situation. The more your tests resemble the way the software is used, the more confidence they can give you. How is the custom hook used? It's used in a component. In this exercise, we've gone back to our simple counter, except now the logic is all on a custom hook, and we need to test that functionality. Okay, so to do that, we'll make a test component that uses the hook, and that way we can test it. Cool. Let's see what we've got. Create a simple function that uses the use counter hook, and then exposes some UI that our test can interact with to test the capabilities of this hook. Here's how to use the hook. So, function component. Then we're going to return, what we're going to do? We're going to use counter. So let's just grab the hook to see how we're going to use it. So we're going to use the use counter hook, and that's going to return the count and 2 methods. So let's return a div. So we can test the value with that. Let's add a button. Type button. The plus. I'm gonna actually, the reason I'm doing a plus, I'll show you in a second why I'm doing a plus. This is just for testing purposes. It's weird, I thought that would break. Yeah, cool. I'm gonna do that. Actually can add an area label here. Then I can get by label text. So this will be decrement. Oh, comes first. Here we'll do an area label. Let's call this counter. Cool, so we have a counter component. It's pretty straightforward. I'm going to expose the count and increment decrement function. So we want to render the component. So let's render count. Get the elements you need using screen. Const increment button was screen. And I think we can use get by label text here. Increment. Let's call it plus button. Yep. Minus button. get by label text, decrement. Set the initial state of the hook. So the initial state, I assume. So where are we getting use counter from? Let's open that. Let's just throw that down here. Let's just make a bit more space. So we've got an initial count here, which is going to default to 0. So we're just going to expect. Oh, we're also going to need the. What's the best way to get this? Dev, yeah, he's just doing current count on a div. A text. Yeah, testing library, get a text. Display value. By text. Yeah, I think I can use by text. Get by text. I wonder if it needs to be an exact match. So I'm just going to remove this for now. And I'm going to do a log and just make sure I've got everything so far. So I've got the plus button, minus button, the count node. Count node looks like a span. Looks like we've got the correct thing here. Minus button is a button element. Plus button is button. Good times. So now we're going to expect count node that's going to get the node. Okay, open 7. Just want the node. Let's see what it gives us. Do we want to have text content? To contain element, to have attribute, to be called. have focus. Yeah, to have text content. Let's just see if this passes. Oh. And then if we just do convt, this should fail. Two times. Do I want text content here? I want to assert that that is 0. I mean, just do that. That's gonna fail. Oops, and it passes. Then we're gonna interact with it. I don't think that's supposed to be that. So we're going to say plus button. Ooh, who is it you do this again? Screen. That's getting by text. Just want to actually click it. So debugging. I have user events here, which we're going to use. User event. Click. And then we already have plus button here. Then we're going to expect count node, have text content. Count as 1. And then we're going to another user event. This time we're going to click minus button. And we're going to expect. We're going to learn to spell. Then we're going to expect count node to have text content. Back to 0. Now, this fails, and thankfully I know why it fails. Because we have declared buttons here that don't do anything. So I'm going to have an on click here, and then that is going to decrement. I'm going to click here. It's going to increment, and that should pass. Oh, so it kind of looks like we've just tested this counter component, but I suppose we've just built some dummy UI to test the hook. So we can assert that the hook is working because we're using it in a scenario that we would normally use it. So that kind of makes sense. Extra credit, fake component. Sometimes it's hard to write a test component without making a pretty complicated test component. In those situations, you could try something like this. Test component, result. We'll use this. Interesting. So we're defining a let outside of the function. We render the function, which will use the hook, which will return the values and update the let. That's clever. Learn more about this approach from my post, how to test custom hooks. That's cool. So let's grab this. Let's go into the exercise. So instead of this, I'm going to define this in the component. Let's define it in here. I suppose we could define it outside. Let's just put it in here for just now. We have a test component here. We are going to render the test component. So instead of deconstructing the values here, we're going to use counter. And then return null. Then I'm going to render this, which should update this let. Now we can do a const. Now we can deconstruct the result. And from here, count, increment, I'm actually just going to put this into a separate test. So let's grab this. I'm going to put that in here. Then I'm going to grab this. Render the counter here. And then we shouldn't need to do this. So that's our original test, and test with fake component. I'll tidy up the naming of this after. So we're going to declare a let. We've got a test component, which is going to accept props. We don't need props just now. The result is going to give us our methods back. So is this going to use the re-render from earlier? Oh, this one's fun. Right. So here we can deconstruct the values, right? This is going to update this variable, and then we can retrieve these values. So that's returning null. Let's just ditch all of this. Let's just get count, and that should give us 0 back. So that's a good one to start with. So the count is 0. So we're just going to assert initially that when we render this hook, pass. Times. So now we need to call increment. We should just be able to call increment. I'm not putting a step or anything in. And I just want to console log count. Just going to do this before and after calling increment. So hopefully we see a 0 and then a 1. Get a 0 and then an update to test component inside a test was not wrapped in act. Good times. The old act functions come back to bite me. So you're on the input. Wrap test act. DOM test utils. So this logged, so I'm thinking, yeah, it's the increment that failed. So I'm gonna grab this act, then we're just gonna call increment. Why did it fail? It was not wrapped in act. When testing code that causes React state updates. Anything that causes a state update. Well, this count value is a state, a stateful value. I mean, cool, it didn't work, but cool. Do I want internal state in this application? This is only going to render once. Do I want to use the re-render? I don't think so, because I'm not passing any props to it. Interact with and assert on results. Let's take a look at the blog post, see if he mentions anything. Handle split. Is this going to be the for the setup function? Yeah, okay. So let's do that later. Okay, I'm gonna come out of this and okay, so we need to do it manually. So we can assert that this is 0. You're gonna call this. That's what the result gives us. So the result is initially 0 when we log it. We expect the count to be 0. Then that logs this count. Right, so the count's 0 there. It then logs again. We call increment. The result has updated the count. I have bound that to a const. So if I do result.count here, let's get rid of this. I call result.increment here. So let's call this old. Let's call this new. I actually shouldn't need this anymore because I know that it's updating. Yeah. It's because I bound it previously to a const. So it was referencing a stale value, which is always fun. So now, after incrementing, then I should expect result.coint to equal 1. Just going to call act again, but this time I'm going to call decrement. And then finally, I'm going to expect this to be back to 0. We should have 2 passing tests now. Good times. Setup function. Add tests titled allows customization of the initial count and allows customization of the step. And test those use cases, then abstract away the common logic into a setup function. This one might be a little tricky thanks to variable references, but I know you can do it. Here's a little tip. You'll need to change your test component. Okay, let's set up and then let's add the tests first, right? So that's what we need. Super lazy. So I'm going to call test, call by function. Okay, test. Autocomplete, man. Test. Get 2 tests. One is that. 2 is that. It's customization of the initial count. What's customization of the step? For now. Okay, here's a little tip. Due to variable references, you will need to change your test component. So Okay, so what did we do previously? We rendered test component. This should be counter object to assign. So we have our results. We're gonna call this, and then let's render the test component, and then let's just log results. See what we get back. Cool. So we're getting the count back, increment and decrement. That's exactly what we want. And actually, we can just grab this. So this to results. This should just all pass. I did not. It's undefined. Okay. That's fine. That would have been too easy anyway. That's probably because I added my assertions in the wrong test. So let's just comment that out for now. Yeah, this should work. But it doesn't satisfy the test condition. It doesn't allow the customization of the initial count. So use counter. Accepts an object. So our initial count through. I'm going to say the initial count to 10. We'll use object shorthand to assign the initial count to 10. Not passing in any props at them. I mean, we could pass it in here, but we don't need to for the moment. So this should now fail. Because it expected 0 and received 10. So we can actually say this is going to be the initial count. This is going to be the initial count plus 1. This is going to be back to the initial count. Good times. So now it satisfies the test conditions, right? So let's be super lazy and grab this and fun comment. And we're going to change initial count. If we look at this, this object accepts two parameters: object initial count and step. So I change this to initial step. It's 2. So this should equal the initial step because it will default to 0 plus the initial step. So this should equal the initial step. That's going to fail. This should equal... Oh, sorry. It should initially equal 0 because the initial value is 0. And then if we hit increment, it should be 0 plus the initial step. And then that should be back to 0. Initial step is also a terrible naming because A is wrong, and we need to pass in step instead of initial step, and B, the step never changes, so there's no point in calling it initial. Nice, so that passes. All right. Here's a little tip. Due to variable references, you'll need to change your test component a little bit. Okay, so we've done this. Then abstract away the common logic into a setup function. So we're going to create function setup. So let's look. Let's ignore this one, because that's actually using some dummy UI. We have this, and we have this. Let's ignore this one as well for now. Let's just focus on the two. So we have a test component. We're definitely going to need this. Let's grab results. Now, what if we passed in results as an argument here? And use counter. What if we took results? And what if we had an options object? Let me just pass in options. Yep. And then we rendered test component in the setup. So we no longer need that. Let's define an object called results. Going to define the initial count 10, and then we're instead of calling render test component, we're going to call it our setup function, and we're going to pass our results object to it, and we're going to pass an options object with the initial count. Then in here, we've got the step. We're going to do the same thing. We should be able to get rid of this. Should be able to just call setup. We'll pass the results object from here in. We're going to pass the step. Is this going to pass first time? Yeah, good times. And that's why we need this as an object. Nice. So when this assigns it, it's going to assign it to the object that's passed in. It's clever. Cool. I mean, to flew through that, I thought it was going to take a little bit longer. Okay, using the React hooks testing library. It's 5 to 10 actually. Your setup function is very similar to this. Swap your own. Maybe we can actually quickly do this. Your setup function is very similar to the render hook. Oh, testing. Hooks testing library. Very similar to the render hook function. Let's grab render hooks. Suppose we can just grab act from here as well. And instead of setup, const result equals, I'm going to call render hook, which is a function, accepts a callback. We call use counter. And we're just going to pass our options object in here. Just the initial count. Shouldn't need to call this again. It's just, that's giving me the result of that back. Let's just return this to result. And then let's do the same here. So step's going to need to be first. Result. Get rid of that. We no longer need our setup function. We're instead going to call render hook, which is a function, callback. We call our custom hook. And then we pass the step through an argument. And if that works, so oh, I used the wrong act. Dot current. Oh well, actually. Result. Just obviously a reference. Doesn't look like the act is. Oh, it's because I'm using multiple acts. So I no longer need this setup function. I'm just going to comment these two tests out. I can fix it. Take count. Result, current increment, expect, result, go. So close. So close. Let's just make sure I haven't done anything silly. Result is a render hook. Should be passing that. It has this exact Result.current.increment thing. Because that is not a deconstructed object. Ah! Expected 0 got undefined. Result.current. Found it. I mean, I'm going to stay on for an extra 5 minutes and just get this working. Expect result dot current. Did I just miss a current? Shouldn't have taken so long getting water. Yes! Love finishing an exercise at the end. That is awesome. Right. I'm going to leave. I don't need these. Maybe I will just leave them. Just because. Actually, nah, I don't need them. Good times. All right. Let's go to the markdown. If we go here, fill this out for Kent. What did we learn? How to test custom hooks with dummy UI and no UI? That was actually one of my favorites so far. That is good times. All right, I'm going to sit and watch these, but I'm just going to be off mic and stuff, so I might as well just end the stream here. So thank you for watching, and I will be back on Thursday. Oh, I finished. That was the final one. So I will be back on Thursday to start React Suspense. Good times. All right. See you all then.